Hello, everyone, and you are listening to the Triple T podcast, Tony's Tech Talks. My name is Tony Seminary, and I am based in the City of Roses, Portland, Oregon. Thank you very much for listening today. During my day job, when I'm not doing podcast, I'm the founder and CEO of IT Motives. We're a technology recruiting company that helps our clients with executive search, direct placement, and contract staffing, both on a retained and contingent basis. If you'd like to learn more about IT Motives, please visit our website at itmotives.com, and you can also view this podcast there as well. The premise of Triple T, Tony's Tech Talks, is really to get to know people's stories, understand how they got into technology, kind of what's going on in technology and things of that nature. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce the guest on my show this morning. Her name is Nadya Boone. Nadya is the Vice President of Product with DAT Analytics and Freight. DAT stands for Dial a Truck, if you didn't know. They are headquartered in Beaverton, Oregon, with an office also in Denver, Colorado, and they are definitely growing. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Nadya, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tony, it's great to be here, as they always say, but it really is true.
Yeah, thank you very much. To start out with, I'd love to learn more about your story. I kind of talk about the Reader's Digest version of people's stories. Maybe to start with, just kind of where you grew up, where you call home, and kind of your journey to this point in your professional life.
Sure. I grew up, I always say I grew up and down the West Coast in different parts of California and Oregon. And then my family finally settled in San Diego when I was in fourth grade. But since then, I moved after college. I lived up and down California and then moved to Albuquerque and then moved to Oregon 25 years ago. And so I guess this is home now. If you love the rain and you love coffee, it's probably a good place for you. And sort of my tech journey is, we'll see if it's interesting. I came home from school one day. I think I was about 13, 14. I came home from school one day and I said, Dad, I want to build bridges. And he said, oh, well, then you want to be an engineer. And I was like, okay. So I started learning about engineering, all the different kinds of engineering. And I went to college for decided in college to pick electrical engineering as my major. But partway through college, I needed to take a break for personal reasons. I ended up getting a job kind of during my gap year, if you will, as a software engineer, very junior software engineer for a little company that a friend of my dad's had started. So I'd had a few programming classes and he was looking for some, new software folks. So they took me on, took a chance on me. And it turns out it's something I really liked and I was good at, but I was really determined to stick with electrical engineering. I really thought that's what I wanted to do. And so I finished up my degree as a double E. But after a few years doing that true like electrical engineering work, like building fabs for Intel and things like that, I just realized that I would much rather be in software. And I had to really kind of have a long, hard talk with myself about that because I had a lot of my self-worth and my ego tied up in being like an electrical engineer and I had a license and I don't think that's it was a growing up moment for me to realize that's not the right way to make choices about where I want to spend my time. It's not based on my ego but really on, what's the work I want to do and what am I good at? And I'm a much better software engineer than I was an electrical engineer. So I moved back into software and then had a good run doing that, moving into engineering management. And then through a very long series of events, and since this is the Reader's Digest version, I'll skip them. Ended up in product about 8-9 years ago and loved it. Just felt like it was the best job ever, the thing I was meant to do. And then was able over time, after I kind of learned the craft of product management, to then move back into leadership. I'd been in leadership roles in engineering and I missed that. I missed leading teams and helping folks grow. So moved then into product management leadership probably about 4 years ago. So that's my somewhat short version.
It's very fascinating. So building bridges, where did that come from?
I don't know. I don't know if I heard something in school or somebody was talking about something, but it's funny because bridges have just been a theme for me my whole career in terms of like how I think about what I do, why I do it. But to me, like a bridge is still kind of my touchstone. I actually have a cup here with a picture of the steel bridge in Portland. It's my favorite bridge. And I guess they're just a symbol of like what humans can do with ingenuity and persistence and to make the world a better place.
Maybe building bridges with other people?
Yeah, it's a good metaphor for that. It's a good metaphor for, moving. I think there's a lot that goes into it. And it's also something humans have done for a long time, right? So it's pretty interesting.
I'm fascinated by bridges. So yeah.
If I ever get a tattoo, it's going to be of a bridge. So
the steel bridge.
Yes, in fact, it will be the steel bridge.
Why do you like the steel bridge so much? Just curious.
Well, because it is both. It carries cars, trains, pedestrians, and it's a vertical lift bridge. It's a really unique historical bridge in Portland, and I think underrated. So go check it out.
Multi-purpose. Yeah. Yes. You have an interesting story with DAT to share. This is the second time you had the chance to work for them. I believe you told me the first time was back in 1996, and then I believe you joined them last year. So love to know how the first time happened and just kind of take us through that a little bit. That's very interesting because I believe you said you had a job offer from them in 96 that you turned down for another opportunity. And then, years later, you get another job offer that you took and you're currently working in. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. We moved to Portland in '96. My husband at the time was working for Intel, and it was his turn to move. We moved to Albuquerque for my job, and we moved here for his job. And we always say it's my turn now, and I like Portland, so we haven't moved. That's why we're still here. But anyway, so we moved to Oregon, and this was right, in fact, not too long after I'd made the decision that software was going to be my thing, not electrical engineering. And so I moved to Oregon, ready to make a change anyway, and was looking for jobs doing software engineering, and had, in fact, 2 job offers. One was from DAT, which at the time, for Portland folks, was still owned by the Jubitz brothers, who founded Jubitz Truck Stop, and they founded Dial-A-Truck, which was originally 40-something years ago a service to help drivers find trucks, or find loads rather, that was based out of them being able to walk into a truck stop and see up on like a TV screen loads that were available. And this was a big improvement over the old method, which had been index cards on a bulletin board. And so the whole history of DAT has been on like, how do we bring technology to this problem of matching carriers with loads, with freight that needs to get moved. That's the core of what we do. So in '96, this was based a lot on fax servers and other things, and it was definitely become, they were continuing to invest in technology, and had a lovely time with them. I got to meet one of the owners, but I also had another great job offer from another local company, Standard Insurance, or the Standard as they're now owned. It was also great, another great Portland story of local, and it was downtown. And I had been living in Albuquerque, which is a great city, but not a real city. And I missed that from my time in San Francisco. And I thought, oh, it'd be so good to work downtown in a high rise again. And so that's probably what tipped me over. And, but as you said, 20-something years later, I had gotten to, through friends, met the CEO, Claude Pamilia at DAT, and he reached out to me when he was in need of someone to lead up his product team. And so we chatted and eventually decided it was going to be the right thing to do. So I've been here just over a year now.
So obviously no hard feelings from the first time you turned them down.
Yeah, I think it was before Claude's time. I think I figured out I've run into 2 people who worked here now who worked there then, and we do have folks who've been there a long time, but nobody that I would have actually met then. So no hard feelings. I think it's, like you said, I think it's a great story, and it really just shows the value, you're a great example of the value of building your network and keeping those bridges, open, never leaving those bridges up. And so I was able to come home to roost.
Amen about building the bridges and keeping those long-term relationships. That's a great story. And it's, I think it's indicative of DAT. You know, they have a lot of long-term employees, as you alluded to, and there's some that we both mutually know and that you work with in technology. So, yeah. Could you kind of describe what DAT does? I know you touched on it just briefly there. What do they do?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the core of our industry is serving the trucking business in North America, and we do that in a few ways. One of them is one I talked about, which is we match carriers and loads. And where before, I talked about TV screens and fax machines. Now we're a full-on SaaS company. We are a true modern SaaS company. We deliver all our services through web and mobile apps. And so the services include this freight matching aspect, or the load board, helping people find each other. We have over 1 million posts. And just to give you a sense of scale, over 1 million posts like freight loads are posted on a typical day. And over 100,000 people might come looking on our load boards on a given day to go try to find them. So it's a big network in North America, and we're the preeminent network there. And then the other kind of flagship product we have for our customers is helping them understand the rates. How much should I pay if I need to move this load from, let's say Portland to Long Beach? What's the going rate? What do I think the rate's going to be next year? So we have a wealth of rate data and a whole data science team that's part of my org that looks at that data and finds ways to help our customers use that to run their businesses so that they can make the best decisions in terms of getting the right margin, getting the best deal, knowing how to time stuff, knowing when capacity will be scarce, in case they've really got a load that needs to be somewhere. And so it's just some samples of some of the things we do for the carriers. I think of them, the truck drivers, to use a more common term, and then the freight brokers and the shippers across North America.
Yeah, very good. What's kind of the day in the life for you? What is your typical day, if there is one, kind of look like?
A day in the life. Well, so my purview includes product management and our UX design team and our data science team. So those are the 3 areas I'm responsible for. And then, as a member of the exec team, there's sort of responsibility then you take on at the C-level where you need to be thinking about the whole company. And so I'm equally responsible to my colleagues in finance and marketing and sales and strategy and so forth. So I think the sort of ways that I'm always looking at the dial of how I spend my time is I need to be spending a fair amount looking out ahead. So, what am I doing in terms of looking out at where we're going strategically? Am I reading about the market, talking to customers, looking at the competition, talking to my peers to see what challenges they're facing, and we're thinking out, multiple years. And then I'm working with the directors on my team on more of the strategy, the execution, if you will. Okay, great. So we've got roadmaps, we've got dates we want to hit, we've got product launches. How are we going to position them? We've got research on data science. How is that going? Do we need to prioritize that work? So then there's that sort of operational aspect of just that. And then the other part of it is building the systems and growing the people. So I see a big part of my job is both building a system in which people can do their best work and helping the up-and-coming leaders on my team grow and hit their goals and helping them take on more and more. So then it, frees me up to go do something else, and it creates a virtuous cycle.
Yeah, very good. I know that you folks are hiring. That's very well known. And if people don't know, this is an opportunity, I suppose. With your teams, what kind of positions are you hiring for at the moment?
We are hiring in product management, and we are hiring in UX design. I think every one of my teams is hiring right now. We're actually looking for a UX design leader, which is an exciting opportunity to come and lead up the design effort for several lines of product and some new things that we're getting into. And then we're also hiring in data science. So really across the board. And we're growing. And a lot of that is because the good news is too, a lot of these positions are open because of growth. People ask me a lot why I came to DAT, and one part of the answer is, we are in an enviable position where we have these flagship products that are known and loved and trusted across the industry, and we're investing in growth. Sometimes you get to a mature SaaS company and it's interesting, but it's not X just sound like super interesting, right? So because you're not like doing new things, you're not trying to conquer new territory, but we really are. We made a strategic acquisition last year that moves us into a new part of the market, and we're investing a lot in terms of what we can do and build with the amount of this incredible amount of size of the network and data that we have. There's a lot of cool things we're working on. So.
Talk about the acquisition. How will that differentiate, or what will that do for DAT?
Yeah, we acquired a line of business from a company called Chainalytics, and the line of business we acquired and the great folks who came with it were part of what are known as the Freight Market Intelligence Consortium at the time. Now they form our Shipper and Benchmark Analytics group. But what they brought, a lot of DAT's traditional focus had been on the freight brokers, the people who were sort of the intermediaries in the freight business, and then the carriers, the truck drivers, and then the larger carrier companies. And we had served the shipper market to a smaller extent. And a shipper is simply just somebody who needs to move a good. It could be a manufacturer, it could be a large retail chain that needs to move goods between point A and point B, but anybody that just needs to move freight is what's considered a shipper. So as you can imagine, that's a huge market, right? There's a lot of people who need to move stuff as part of their business. And so with this acquisition, we brought in folks who had been serving that market very specifically and very well. And so we brought in a lot of intelligence about those folks and what they need, as well as a product that was really geared at helping the shippers execute in the freight market well. It provided benchmarking and sort of performance analytics to help them know, okay, where can we do better? Where can we maximize, or minimize our spend, I guess I should say. Yeah, and so it's been great to bring them in now and have that perspective, really looking at all of our products, because what we see is that there's a lot of what we were already doing has more opportunity to serve that market. And then we're looking at how to bring these other types of performance analytics out to a broader market as well.
Very good. Very good. So it sounds like getting much more into the shipping side, the shipper side of the market. Yeah.
Big opportunity for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. What's the sizzle behind coming to work for DAT Analytics and Freight? You've mentioned a few of them, obviously. Could you talk more about that a little bit? What would entice somebody to come work for DAT?
Yeah. I think one is, everyone's kind of got their sweet spot of what size company they like to work at. And I think we're in a good spot for a lot of folks, though, because we're about a 500-person company. So we're large enough to have like resources, and the sort of structure, and the sort of benefits and so forth that you might be looking for in terms of support for career growth, for learning opportunities, for a variety of work. But we're not so big that you get lost. We work with very low walls between teams and across and sort of up and down the hierarchy. So it's frequently, that a product manager might be in a meeting with our CEO and talking about what we're doing and why. So I think a big part of the sizzle is the opportunity to have such a big impact, whether you're in engineering or product or design, in a company that's growing, while at the same time knowing that it's a stable company, right? Like startups are fun and dynamic and have that energy, and you have to be willing to sort of take the ups and downs that go with it. And so for some folks, I'd much rather be like, get as it's sort of a Goldilocks thing of like, hey, I get the fun of like going and building new things and working on a true modern SaaS product. And I know I'm getting paid, right? We're a very stable company. We've been in business for a long time, and we have literally hundreds of thousands of customers. So.
Yeah, very good. Very good. What's it like being a female in technology? And you're not just in technology, Nadya, but you're in leadership. What's that like for you? How can we encourage more folks like yourself to go on that kind of journey to get into not just technology, but into leadership as well? Loved your thoughts on that and kind of what it's been like for you.
Yeah. I think, a lot of days I think it's probably just like, I have a friend of mine, we joke about like, are we a woman in technology today or just in technology today, right? Some days you're just feeling like some days you feel like you're a woman in technology, which can be good and bad. And the good parts are the opportunities to see, to help others, to maybe break down a wall for somebody else, to help someone maybe be bolder than she would have been if she hadn't gotten that little extra nudge. And to just see that sometimes simply by being there in the room, it's showing other women what's possible, right? I've sometimes been the first in a particular role, the first VP of this or the first director of that or whatever, who was a woman. And I know that, from my own career growing up, I know when I saw those women ahead of me, it encouraged me. I was like, oh, and I still see that there's a woman I admire tremendously who, who's a few years ahead of me in her career. And when I see what she's done, I know like, oh, there don't have to be limits on what I can do. She can do that. I can do that. I never thought of doing that. So that's kind of the fun and exciting part where you feel like, and then on like sort of the rougher days, I think for me personally, it just sometimes feels like there's a tax, right? Like there's a little extra effort I have to put in. Either it's because I know a lot of folks have talked about maybe the acceptable behavior for women is different. And I'm still coming from a place of relative privilege of I grew up as a middle-class white woman in America. Like I'm coming to the table with a lot of stuff that's kind of on the easy setting for me. I certainly know that women of color or people from different backgrounds than I do have a even rougher time, right? But I think there is for anyone who's coming in from an underrepresented group, there's sort of a tightrope of like what's considered acceptable, and always trying to make sure, for me anyway, that I'm mostly trying to stay in those bounds of what people are going to find, neither too warm nor too cold, neither too aggressive nor too weak, all those things, and trying to balance that out and understand how people might perceive you. And then I guess the other part too is sometimes trying to make sure that people understand that I am here for my merits and that I'm not a token, right? And so when you're the only woman in the room, people can sometimes use you as an example, and even with good intent, you sort of have to, like, the back of your mind, I'm like, well, that's great. I'm happy to represent and be, the woman, blah, or whatever in this particular group, but also I want. The downside of that is you wonder, well, then do people see you as a token? You're not there on your own merits. And again, fortunately, very seldom have I felt directly challenged because I was a woman. And so that's why I think of it as a tax. It's not a blocker. It's not like I can't get where I want to go. I think I've had amazing opportunities. I've had amazing support from men and women. And a lot of men have really helped me in my journey. And so that's why I think of it. Sometimes it's just a little extra effort.
Is there a way, do you have any thoughts on how we as a community in technology can peel away that tax, if you will, so folks like yourself don't have to shoulder that burden and make things more normal?
Yeah, I think it comes from people who are being willing to listen and learn about experiences that are different than their own, and then think about how they can change their behavior to be more inclusive of that, right? Which could be recognizing different styles of leadership as equally productive and valid than the one that they're used to working with. It could be rethinking how they view certain behaviors as either weak or strong. But I think it really comes when I think of some of the awesome men I've worked with who've really, had the deeper conversations with me about it, and it's been fascinating for me to think watching them think about, oh, how can I change my behavior? Am I always going to, like, when I need a sounding board, do I always go to the same 3 guys because they're like, they're my buddies, it's easy, it's convenient, they're the ones I go have lunch with or whatever, versus like, am I thinking about how can I broaden my circle so that I'm getting input from a broader set of folks? And I tried to do this too. We all have our convenient, we all have our comfy spots, right? I have my comfy folks that I talk to, right? So I'm always also trying to challenge myself of how can I get a broader and more diverse set of input and experiences so that as I'm thinking or I'm making decisions, I'm getting a better view. So I don't think it's something that's limited. It's not like just one type of people need to do it. I think we all benefit from it. But I think when we do that, we make a world that's more inclusive for everybody. And that's a good thing.
I think these kind of conversations too, hopefully they will help, and they will also let other people understand what others are going through. I think the word is empathy. We as humans talk about a lot. And I simply think of that as just putting yourself in another person's shoes. Very, very simply, as far as the definition of empathy. And so be able to do more of that. But you are a trailblazer. You really are, Nadya. I don't think there's anybody that would disagree. I mean, look at how successful you have been and where you've come from to where you are today. And I think that's an amazing segue into the success you've had. What do you attribute that to? What are your secrets? Who have been some great mentors? You don't have to name names, but what did they teach you? And, I know that it takes a village to raise a child, they say, and to get to this point in your career, we all have had and needed help. Nobody does this journey alone in life, obviously. But you've been incredibly successful. What do you attribute that to? And do you have any secrets you wouldn't mind sharing?
Gosh, I mean, one of them I kind of alluded to, and this is definitely your mileage may vary, but I'll just talk maybe about some of the things that made a big difference in my life when I look, as I think about it. And one of them was one I talked about earlier, which is killing my ego. Like I just believe you got to kill your ego, and because you need to be making for me. It was a double-sided sword, a two-edged sword, because the other half of like making sure I wasn't making a career decision because like I thought it was cooler to be an electrical engineer than a software engineer is that I didn't value the things I was good at. So I came from a perspective of, if this is easy, then for me, then it must be, and without consciously thinking of it, like it took a little while for me to figure this out. But I was like, if this is easy for me, therefore it must be easy. Therefore it must not be very valuable. Therefore I should go do the hard thing. So I'm the sort of person who will always go run the hardest project in the building and try to be on that project. This is not always a good thing. Sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it does not. Just to be really clear, I'm not giving that as career advice. I'm just saying, but I think that part of, people talk a lot more now, fortunately, about knowing your strengths and worrying less about mitigating your weaknesses and more about building on your strengths. And so for me, a big difference was when I was willing to accept that there's things I'm good at. I was good at software when I did software for a living. I really enjoy and love managing people and try to do a decent job at it. And I'm willing to learn endlessly about how to get better. I never get bored of it. So I think for me, that combination of like valuing what I'm good at and also respecting where my brain wanted to spend time, right? Like I was trying to force myself into a hole, and sort of another pivotal moment in my career was when I realized I was doing software, and that if I was given a choice between like a technical journal, a tech magazine to read, and the Wall Street Journal, I was going to pick up the Wall Street Journal every time because I was interested in business and people and management and leadership and all this stuff the Wall Street Journal talked about. And again, it was I had to really have a hard talk with myself to kind of give up being a technologist to go be a leader because somehow I thought I should stay in technology. And some people should, they're great. Don't be a manager, just be a manager. God knows it's a hard job, but it was the job I wanted to do, and I had to just admit it. So I guess that's part of the journey for me, is just always being really honest with myself. But the flip side of it is, and I think something that's helped me as a leader, it's helped me be a leader in a way that's consistent with my values, because that's also really important to me, is if you're approaching your work from a place of altruism, from a place of like, I really, truly just want what is best for this product, this customer, this line of code, like whatever the thing is that you're working on. Like, and if you can be fearless about that, you can have really hard conversations with people. It turned out if I need to go to one of my peers now and say, hey, I disagree with this choice you're making, or I need to go to my boss, and this is not just now, but in my career, when I know that I'm truly, look at my heart, I'm like, is this about me or is this about the problem? And if it's really about the problem that we're trying to solve, it opens up a lot of conversations that I think otherwise people are hesitant to have. And I think it lets you present difficult conversations in a way where people are willing to engage because you've taken the personality out of it. So I guess, some of the secrets, if they equal my success, certainly some of the hard-won lessons of my success have been those two things. Like, value what you're good at, be willing to embrace it, and kill your ego.
Taking it full circle, I think that is what you did, right? When you pull the emotion out of it, as you mentioned, and you need to talk to a colleague and disagree professionally, or talk to your boss and disagree professionally, and it's something that you really love and value, then it is taking that ego out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really about solving the problem. And I think that's huge. And I also think what's really interesting, these are my words, but in life, you have strengths and weaknesses, and that's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
And at a certain point in your life, the weaknesses are a weakness for a reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I always say this about myself, like, what I'm not good at, I'm almost 50, and it probably is not going to I'll never be good at that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to accentuate my strengths and play those up and really mitigate my weaknesses. And I think that all too often, sometimes we as humans, like, oh, we've got to be better at something we're just naturally not good at. And we get those questions in interviews, right?
Yeah.
Hey, tell us what your strengths are. Tell us what your weaknesses are. And it's just wired in us. And we're like, oh, we got to get better at what we're not good at. Gosh, it's just like moving something like a rock up the hill. And it's like, oh my goodness, I just can't do this. It's really, really interesting to hear you say, essentially, just kind of accepting what isn't a natural strength and just taking what you do have and really, making that where you're leveraging, if you will. And I think, you didn't say this word, but you're an overachiever too. You mentioned it earlier. You wanted to take like the hardest problem on, or the hardest project on. And that's an amazing strength. So, it's those are some of the reasons, as you said, why you're so successful, being very honest with yourself and taking your ego out of it. I love it. That's great. A very simple question I have, and it's innocent and simple, but it stumps people. We just kind of talked about it a little bit, but what is your why? Besides providing for your family and all those other things, putting a roof over your head and, all the basic necessities we need as humans, why do you go to work every day?
I really love this question because about a year and a half ago, I was listening to a podcast interview with Simon Sinek, who gave this famous TED Talk about what's your why. And I hadn't heard about him. I sort of knew the name, but I didn't really know. And I'd never watched this TED Talk, but I heard this interview with him and he was talking about his why. And then I wanted to watch this TED Talk. And it really got me thinking about what my why was. And this was actually before I had decided to come here to DAT. But as it turned out, it was very important timing because it was right before this opportunity presented itself. And so I did a lot of thinking about it. And it actually comes back to the steel bridge. Is sort of my image of it, but it's my why is I build great products by leading and serving great people and great teams. So those are all the things. And to break it down, like I am a builder. I love to build things. I want to make something happen. I want to make something exist that wasn't there before. And I love products because I've worked in IT, I've worked in other industries, but building products, building the thing that the company sells, like it goes back to my Wall Street Journal thing. Like I want to build the thing that is solving some human's problem in a way that they're willing to pay money for and be delighted and be, their world is better because we made this thing happen. So then it's like, how do I do that? Well, by leading and serving. So as a product leader, have I set the strategy right? Have I created the systems for people to work in? Am I giving them what they need so that they can execute? Because I can't do this alone. It's a team sport. I'm just one person in this. And then serving, because my philosophy of leadership is about managers and leaders. That's a role in a team. And I have a certain job to play, and I'm accountable to my team just as much as they are accountable to me, if not more so. So I really believe in that model of leadership, that I'm here to do a job for them, to help them be successful, and then people and teams, because I'm a people person and I'm a team person. I'm a team-based creature. I love working on teams. I think we do our best work on teams. And so I can go on and on. But that's my why. I build great products by leading and serving great people and great teams. And because I had worked through this, when this opportunity came along, it was much easier to evaluate because I knew my why. So if you don't have your why yet, go figure it out. Listen to Tony. So.
Amen. Amen. About 2 years ago, I had, within about 3 months, 2 of my close friends asked me that same question. And I didn't know the answer. I didn't know it.
Uh-huh.
And I had to go figure it out. When I started answering both of them, they're like, wait a second. That's not the why. That's the how. That's the what. It was very, very interesting. It was a little humbling too, but in a good way. It was very, very good. And so I did that introspective and said, what is it that makes me tick? Why do I get out of bed every single morning? So
will you share it?
Absolutely.
What's your why?
Absolutely. So 3 things. And this helped me. Some folks know that my partner and I had a baby girl 11 months ago. And so she was born August 7th. And it was around June or July of last year when I was having some soon-to-be father freak-out moments. And I kept saying to myself, the whys that you go to work are the same reasons that you get up every day and be Tony Seminary, the one that doesn't go to work. And that is building long-term relationships with others, making career connections, and growing people. Those are my 3 whys. And when I thought about having a child for the first time and having some of those freak out moments, like, oh my God, I don't think I can do this. I'm not fit to be a father. No way, no way, no how. I kept coming back to, Tony, you love building long-term relationships. You're going to do that with your child. You love to grow people. You're going to do that with your child. And maybe one day you might get the chance to make career connections for her.
Yeah.
Those are the 3 things that really make me tick inside and outside of work. Those are my whys.
I love it. And I'm sure you're a great dad, and you will continue to be. So.
I love that girl so much. I can't even describe, and it's been amazing. I'm very, very happy. The happiest I've ever been.
That's awesome.
Hobbies and other things. What do you do on the weekends? What do you do on Saturdays and Sundays when you're not building great product teams and being a servant leader and things of that nature? What do you do?
Well, the room behind me kind of shows a little bit. Behind me are my cookbooks and my yarn. So I love to cook. I love to knit and craft and sew and do all those things. To me, it all goes back to the building. Like I love to make stuff happen. But the other thing I do is I write science fiction. So I started writing science fiction over 10 years ago now. Sold a few stories, and so that's my other thing I love to do is write science fiction.
Cool. Very cool. How about this? A fun fact. What's something that some of your colleagues don't know about you outside of work?
I used to do improv comedy.
Is that right?
Yeah. So I, for years, at a local company here in Portland, I was a semi-professional improv comedian, which meant they didn't pay me, but people had to pay to see us, our little troupe act. But I loved it. It was I learned a lot. I learned a lot about listening and being in the moment. I can be a bit of a planner, and so it helped me be a little less, be a little more willing to be spontaneous. And I think it's helped me in a lot of ways in my career, actually. So
improv comedy. Wow. Yeah. It's like Toastmasters for comedy, right?
Yeah. Love that.
Somewhat. Yeah. I can only imagine how that's helped you in your communication style, thinking on your feet, trying to work a room, reading a room, right? I mean, you're in a board meeting with the execs or your team, and you're laying out strategy and you're checking out their nonverbal cues, right?
Yeah, and it's a very much a team sport because you're building off each other. And I used to joke, in my last company, I used to do like keynotes and stuff with our CEO, who, you definitely that ability to like listen and follow and like provide what he needed in the moment. It was all based on improv. I used to tease him. I'm like, it was improv is what trained me for this job, but it was great because it gave me the ability to just. Part of what you're doing with improv is part of the focus is you're there to make everybody else look better. And when you take that position going on the stage, it's very freeing too, right? So again, it's not about you, it's about how do I make this thing we're doing better. So it's fun. Sure. I miss it. Maybe someday I'll have time to get back to it. So.
Is Harvey's Comedy Club still around?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I don't know if they survived the pandemic or if they were even around before the pandemic. I remember going down there a lot when I first moved to Portland 25 years ago. And it was always free to get in if I remember right. But then there was like a 2-drink minimum or something. So somehow, some way, they got money out of you. But yeah, I always remember going down to Harvey's.
Yeah. Well, I'll give a shout out to Comedy Sports, which is where I learned improv. And I think here in Portland, and you can take improv classes there. They have great instructors, great folks. So, and you can also just go watch the professionals perform on the weekend. So I don't know if they're back open again, but Comedy Sports is a great local outfit.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Nadya, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining the show and telling us about your story and telling us about DAT and, what it's like being a female in technology and kind of your journey so far in your career. And it's been an absolute pleasure, and I really do appreciate it.
Thanks, Tony. It's always good to catch up with you, and thanks for having me on.